Recently, I was approached by a journalist who asked me, among other things, what makes a successful tram network? I answered his questions as best I could, bearing in mind that I am not an industry professional, nor am I any kind of expert. I tend to describe my position as professional train nerd. So with all that in mind, let's have a nice, casual discussion about what I think makes a successful tram system. These days there's a lot of overlap between tram and light rail systems, and so there will be with a lot of what I have to say today. So I think the first point to note is that with public transport it's very much a case of horses for courses. Not literally, although that's not going to stop me from using this footage. For some routes, a bus will be better suited. For others, a conventional train or a subway route is best. Trams are good for that middle ground, routes that are more heavily used than a bus service can cope with, but not so heavily used that a train is justified. Why use a tram at all? Why not just put more buses on your bus route to take those extra passengers? Flexibility is the great advantage of buses, but there are other factors. A bus is a large and heavy vehicle, and that causes damage to the road over time, which in turn necessitates roadworks, which affect all road users. A tramline is more expensive to build, but it and its vehicles wear out a lot more slowly. A tram is also more efficient. A London double-decker bus can carry around 80 to 90 passengers. A Croydon CR4000 tram carries 208, and the Urbos trams in use in Edinburgh carry 250. Steel wheels on steel rails produce less friction than rubber tyres on asphalt, and so a tram is more energy efficient. Theoretically, trams can be coupled together in multiple to provide even more capacity, although not all systems in the UK do that. It is common on light rail though. The Docklands Light Railway was designed to operate with single articulated units, but its popularity is such that trains are basically always made up of 2 or more units. In fact, I don't think I have ever seen a single unit train on the DLR. There's also the question of pollution, which is quite a hot button topic these days. Trams are electric, and paired with renewable energy sources, that makes them very low emission indeed. Not completely zero. There are things like brake dust to consider. Buses are increasingly being built with low or zero emissions, but rubber tyres do produce particulate pollution, and there is the question of what to be done with expired batteries. Britain has an advantage when it comes to trams and light rail in that a lot of railway lines were built here, often with very poor planning and an over-optimistic view of passenger numbers. This meant that by the middle of the 20th century they were inefficient. Under the British Railways modernisation plan, many of these were closed in the 60s, the so-called Beeching Acts. Although I, personally, blame the road-loving Transport Minister Ernest Marples. Other such lines limped along, barely justifying their existence. These lines, closed and barely open, were ideal candidates for conversion into light rail routes. Old stations could be recycled as tram stops, and new stops could be put in at bridges and level crossings. Light rail is cheaper to run and maintain than heavy rail, which makes it more economical to provide more services, so you can cater better to what people actually want. Another, perhaps less discussed aspect of light rail and tram services is what we might call propaganda. A criticism I often hear made towards new rail schemes is that they're vanity projects. I couldn't disagree more. If anything, they're the opposite. The politician who green-lights a heavy rail scheme might not even be in office by the time the line opens, but what they will have to deal with is potentially years of disruption and spending of public money before the turning of a single wheel. Any delays to the project will be blamed on them, and their rivals will doubtless use it against them, and the chances are that whoever succeeds them will be there at the triumphant opening. But light rail? Well, that's much quicker to build. Sure, you might need to dig up a street or rebuild an old railway line, but that's a fraction of what's needed for, say, a new subway route. And the end result is a serious commitment to the future of public transport in the area, to improving traffic and to the environment. It looks good from a publicity standpoint, is what I'm saying. So those are the advantages of trams. How do we take advantage of those advantages to build a successful network? Firstly, it needs a purpose. It needs to fit into that particular niche. More passengers than a bus, fewer than a train. Now, nobody could call the Docklands Light Railway a failure, but the fact that it's been supplemented with the Jubilee Line and the Elizabeth Line indicates to me that it probably should have been a heavy rail route. You may disagree, and if so, give me your thoughts in the comments. Or if you agree, or just generally. I would also argue that it needs distance, not only to give it an advantage over, say, walking, but also to demonstrate a commitment. Tied into that, if you're planning a network, I would aim to get as much of the network up and running as soon as possible. Show potential passengers what this thing can do. A critique I heard about the Edinburgh trams in their early days was that they only had a single line between Waverley Station and the airport, with the other planned routes put on hiatus. It looked like a lukewarm commitment. That's changed recently with the opening of an extension, and I think that has rehabilitated the project's reputation somewhat. Maybe I should do a video on the new lines. That's a thought. And by a thought, I mean an excuse to visit one of my favourite cities. Trams should be segregated from road traffic wherever possible. That might sound a little odd, because when you think of trams, you think of street running. And street running is a good thing in terms of convenience, but if a tram is subject to the same traffic jams as cars and buses, it loses the speed advantage. If a tram can have a separate lane, or perhaps share a bus lane, that returns the advantage. And again, if there's a convenient abandoned railway nearby, that can also provide separation, as well as a possible shortcut between town centres. Ideally, the tram should reach the town centre. Now I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but heavy rail can't always have its stations optimally located to serve the town centre. Look at the situation in Watford, where the underground station is way out. Trams can take tight curves and follow streets. On the subject of stations, a successful tram network should connect with other modes of transport. While a tram isn't suitable for all journeys, good connections can give you the best of all worlds. Here at West Croydon, the tram connects with both the National Rail network and a bus station. It does similar at East Croydon. The tram can become part of a far longer journey. Where and how fast a tram goes are two factors in making sure people want to use it, but there are others. And to be honest, many of these are not exclusive to trams, but they should be key considerations for any form of public transport. The obvious one is cost to the passenger. Now in London, a tram fare is the same as a bus fare, which represents excellent value for money. You can get all the way from Wimbledon to Croydon or New Addington or Elmer's End for the same price as a short hop to the shops, £1.75 at present, with the only downside being that you might end up in New Addington. The tram is also included in the hopper fare scheme. That is to say, if you get 2 trams or buses within the hour, you only get charged once. Another consideration is accessibility. To my mind, the biggest flaw of Manchester's Metrolink scheme is, well, its flaw. Level boarding is only possible from raised platforms. Other systems, such as Dublin's Luas, the West Midlands Metro, and my old favourite, the Croydon Tram, have low floors enabling level boarding at the curb. The extra space in a tram means that there can be accommodation for things like wheelchairs and pushchairs. And furthermore, what all trams have in common is a smooth ride, which again makes them better in accessibility terms, say for those who are less steady on their feet. We're now seeing odd hybrids like the so-called tram buses, which are buses designed with the low floor and spacious internal layout of a tram. Another consideration is the attractiveness of stops. Passengers should feel safe and comfortable. Now, this is not an easy feat, given that one of the goals of modern public transport systems is to minimise the number of staff you need. Good lighting, security cameras, and ideally visibility from the main road. You need good information, clear signage and departure indicators, and everything needs to be well maintained. So, to sum up, what makes a successful tram system is convenience, usefulness, affordability, safety, comfort, and accessibility. In other words, the same as any other form of transport. Yeah, sometimes the answer isn't complicated. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the simple answers to my complicated question. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.